Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Wine Investigators. Tonight, as we continue our Wines by Grape series, we are going to talk about Chardonnay. Chardonnay is one of the most planted and recognizable white varieties in the world, but prior to the 70s, it was really only grown in one place, which is France, in Burgundy, and specifically in the southern part of Burgundy. This changed in the 70s, most memorably at the 1976 tasting, which they called the Judgment of Paris. Chateau Montelena's 1973 Chardonnay beat out the big name white Burgundies to win a prize, and the first prize. So this put California on the map, not just for Chardonnay and Cabernet, both of which triumphed in this tasting, but as a fine winemaking region in general. The classic blueprint for Chardonnay, of course, is the southern part of Burgundy. Communes like Meursault, Pouligny-Montrachet, Chassagne-Montrachet, Corton-Charlemagne all have their own characters. Corton-Charlemagne is kind of right at the midpoint between the Côte de Nuit and the Côte de Beaune. I think of it as being more rich, more opulent, but also more focused. Meursault tends to be rounder and nuttier. Pouligny-Montrachet tends to be a little bit racier, although very fine as well. Probably the best white wine I ever had was a 1997 Guy Amiot Grand Cru, so the highest level of quality Montrachet, which I tasted in 2008. It's really kind of mind-blowing how transcendent this grape can be. But it can also be an everyday pleasure. Look at the proliferation of two-buck chuck and its wood chip palette. But thinking about wood, the traditional Burgundian method involved fermentation and maturation in small wood foudre or barrels. And that is the classic style that was emulated internationally starting in the 70s and the 80s, both in California and then in Australia. There's a lot of over-oaking that occurred. Very oaky Chardonnay was quite the rage in the 80s, but people have pulled back since then because the wine has a lot of power on its own. It has, fairly high alcohol. Handled correctly, it can be quite racy in acidity, although it's naturally more moderate in acidity, I would say. If you're thinking about California, which I think is really Chardonnay's second home, places like Carneros, you're going to get a Chardonnay that's going to be a little bit nervier. Somewhere like Russian River, it's generally speaking a bit more opulent. And, there's all sorts of styles. It's a very receptive grape. I do tend to prefer the cooler climate varieties. You can kind of grow it anywhere, but that doesn't mean it will be good. In Australia, I love Margaret River, for instance, or Tasmania as cooler climate Chardonnay producing areas. When I first started this project education-wise, it was because when I was learning about wine, the place names were so daunting. But if you understand that Pouligny-Montrachet and La Crema are the same grape, a little demystifying. So we've talked about France, we've talked about California and Australia, but we're going to return to France to taste a wine made in the southernmost part of Burgundy, in Mâcon, where high-quality wine production was not the norm 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but this particular producer does everything by hand. The Chardonnay itself is done in steel. I don't think I made much mention of Chablis, but that is traditional in that area, even more south in Burgundy. And while this would not be confused with, a Grand Cru Chablis, it is really lovely. This is from Henri Perousset, his Mâcon Village 2017. When you give it a nose, you're going to get lemony freshness, minerality, just a little hint of that. And then we're going to give the wine a taste. So you're getting a lovely creaminess, although freshness as well, because it has been processed in stainless steel. Some of those lemon notes, some herbaceousness, a thyme flavor. This would be great with any kind of seafood. It's a great example of a high quality producer working in an area that would, previously been considered less than and making a very beautiful product. So in any case, this is a little look at Chardonnay. This is the Wine Investigators, and Happy New Year.